introduction of Persuasion, which takes place in England in 1814, 27-year-old Anne Elliot, overlooked by nearly everyone other than her friend and godmother Lady Russell, lives with her father, Sir Walter Elliot, and older unmarried sister Elizabeth at the Elliot estate, Kellynch Hall. Her younger sister Mary is married to Charles Musgrove and lives nearby at his family's estate, Uppercross. The vain widower Sir Walter confesses to Elizabeth, his favorite daughter, that they are in financial trouble. In the rising action, Sir Walter reluctantly agrees to rent his Kellynch Hall property to Admiral and Mrs. Croft, and subsequently moves to Bath to save money and face. Anne, however, stays behind. Coincidentally, Mrs. Croft is the sister of Captain Frederick Wentworth, to whom Anne was persuaded to break an engagement 8 years before. Anne Elliot visits Mary's family at Uppercross Cottage. The Crofts arrive at Kellynch Hall and call on the elder Musgroves. The Crofts' presence stirs Anne's emotions. A week later, news of Captain Frederick Wentworth's arrival at Kellynch Hall reaches Anne. Wentworth and Anne see each other for the first time since they parted 8 years before. Inspired by Wentworth's praise of Lyme, Louisa organizes an Uppercross party visit there. While walking near the ocean, Anne and Wentworth glimpse Anne's cousin and Sir Walter's heir, William Elliot. On their last visit to the Cobb, the harbor wall, Louisa falls and suffers a concussion. Anne returns to Uppercross. In January, Anne and Lady Russell venture to Bath. Anne learns that her father and Elizabeth have reconciled with William Elliot. Despite his charm, Anne mistrusts him. In the climax of Persuasion, Louisa returns to Uppercross and announces her engagement to Captain Benwick. In the following action, Wentworth arrives in Bath, and Anne sees him in town. Her emotions are strong. At a concert, Anne talks with Wentworth, who is happily surprised at the news of Louisa's engagement. Mrs. Smith reveals William Elliot's unsavory past to Anne, which includes failing to have executed the will of Mrs. Smith's husband. The Musgroves arrive in Bath. In the resolution, Wentworth overhears Anne and Captain Harville discuss love and constancy. He guesses correctly that Anne's impassioned defense of women's constancy when hope is gone is meant for him. He confesses his love to Anne and proposes. There are 7 central characters in and out of love in Jane Austen's Persuasion. Anne Elliot is an intelligent, sweet-natured 27-year-old woman, the middle daughter of Sir Walter Elliot and the late Lady Elliot. Ignored by her father and older sister, she's regretted breaking her engagement to a man she loved deeply, having been persuaded to do so by Lady Russell, who thought the marriage would not be in Anne's best interests. Her former fiancé's reappearance causes emotional turmoil and shows her strength of character. Confident, kind, charming, and lucky, Captain Frederick Wentworth is still in love with Anne Elliot, who, 8 years before the start of the novel, was persuaded to end their engagement because of his social and financial status. When he returns 8 years later, still unmarried, he's become rich and more eligible, yet is polite but distant from Anne. He really still loves her. Sir Walter Elliot is a handsome, vain, extravagant, and irresponsible baronet who has squandered his fortune and must rent out his ancestral home. Obsessed with appearance, social standing, and reputation, he moves to Bath to save face and money. Elizabeth Elliot is extremely close to her father. Having inherited his good looks, vanity, snobbery, and lack of perception, Elizabeth, almost 30, is anxious about not yet having found a husband. Lady Russell, a widow, remains close with the Elliots. She's Anne Elliot's best friend and appreciates Anne's intelligence and gentle nature. Her major flaw is snobbery. Because of her honesty and genuine concern, Lady Russell has tried to do her best for the Elliots, particularly Anne, despite having persuaded her to break her engagement because of Lady Russell's misgivings about Captain Wentworth's financial and social status. Mary Elliot Musgrove has married Charles Musgrove, whose marriage proposal Anne refused. She's a rather neglectful mother of 2 young sons who thinks of herself first and often. A chronic complainer, she views marriage as social climbing. William Elliot snubbed Elizabeth Elliot, who saw him as a suitor. A desire for wealth led him to marry a rich woman of lower social standing. As a widower, he encounters Anne Elliot and becomes enamored with her. Anne suspects his charming manners hide something less positive. Her suspicions are confirmed when she learns of his evil doings that ruin her friend's husband. The central symbols in Jane Austen's novel Persuasion are music and ships. Music represents Anne Elliot's solitude and reflects her relationship with Captain Wentworth. Instead of dancing and socializing with others at the great house at Uppercross, she remains in the background, busy and useful as she provides the music for others' enjoyment. In Chapter 8, Anne assumes Captain Wentworth has asked about her because his dancing partner replies, "Oh, no, never. She has quite given up dancing. She had rather play." She has thus created for herself a world apart from the social life of others, observing their pleasures and denying her own. At the same time, music represents her devotion to Wentworth. By secluding herself, she reserves her heart for him. And music, a common enjoyment of theirs, is a way for her to remember the love they shared briefly. Later in the novel, music brings them together again. Ships symbolize the lives and fortunes of several characters in the novel. For Captain Wentworth and Admiral Croft, ships represent their livelihood, which is surrounded by risk and reward. Both speak of ships romantically and with reverence. When Wentworth remembers the asp, his dialogue becomes heightened and emotional in Chapter 8. "She did all that I wanted. I knew she would. I knew that we should either go to the bottom together or that she would be the making of me." Ships also serve as a symbol of the Crofts' happy marriage, in that Mrs. Croft accompanies her husband on long voyages so that they can be together. Ships also indicate upward mobility and heroism. For Captain Wentworth, commanding a ship and leading his men during war have brought him status and fortune, making him a more suitable marriage prospect in the eyes of his more affluent acquaintances, if not Anne's, who loved him 8 years before. From Anne's association with Captain Wentworth, she has a pretty extensive knowledge of the Navy, and her continued interest in it reflects her love for him. To her, ships represent regret, and at the end of the story, fear for her husband's safety. Persuasion, foolishness, and upward mobility are the central themes in the novel of rumors, refinement, and rekindled romance that is Jane Austen's Persuasion. Persuasion, the titular theme of the novel, is both the essence and the major conflict of the story. Before the novel's action, Anne Elliot and Captain Frederick Wentworth have called off their engagement. Anne and Wentworth both struggle with their anger, pain, and remorse, and eventually attempt to persuade the other to give their love another chance, despite disappointment and distrust. Other characters develop this theme too. Whether someone is persuading, being persuaded, or encouraging someone to persuade another, the theme serves as a constant source of tension. Foolishness is a theme Austen builds throughout Persuasion by having all characters act foolish at one time or another. Anne Elliot's foolishness is said to have clouded every enjoyment of youth. In London, Mrs. Smith tells of having participated in frivolous spending with her husband, and now alone bears the weight of their actions. Despite afflicting his family with financial ruin, Sir Walter Elliot exhibits no common sense whatsoever and upholds the outward appearances of his title, perpetuating his money problems. By the novel's end, characters either address their foolishness or ignore it, and those who understand and endeavor to repair the consequences of their mistakes are rewarded with happiness. Finally, the two modes of upward mobility featured in Persuasion are military rank and marriage. As characters navigate the gendered paths of their society, family and friends often involve themselves in romantic decisions because of strict social limitations. Lady Russell, who has influenced Anne Elliot to break her engagement to Captain Wentworth, has urged her to marry Charles Musgrove. More often than not, engagements seem more like a game of strategy, and love is rare. The upwardly mobile Navy men in the novel are only grudgingly accepted by higher social circles, and only when they've achieved a pretty high rank and significant fortune. The pursuit of marriage, walks, vanity, and illness are the main motifs in Jane Austen's novel, Persuasion. The constant gossip surrounding the pursuit of marriage or engagement shows how much society valued marriage. Apparently, the motive to marry is usually to maintain or improve one's social standing. The grounding example of this motif is Captain Wentworth and Anne Elliot's engagement. Because of her father's title and Wentworth's lack of money and family background, others saw the engagement as a failure, despite the couple's suitability of character and deep love for each other. Walks give characters the opportunity to speak privately, as well as to be overheard or seen by others. When on a walk, Anne overhears Captain Wentworth and Louisa Musgrove's conversation at Uppercross, and in Lyme, Anne Elliot is seen by William Elliot. Furthermore, on walks in the country, characters often find comfort and time for reflection in being surrounded by nature. As the characters travel through various locales, the nature they encounter varies. The sight of the Kellinches' lawns and groves and the pleasure they bring Anne tether her heart to the country. In Lyme, characters seek the sea for its beauty. Anne and Henrietta Musgrove wake early and walk to the shore, where they praised the morning, gloried in the sea, sympathized in the delight of the fresh-feeling breeze, and were silent. Vanity lines the novel, which opens by describing the character of Sir Walter Elliot. Vanity was the beginning and the end of Sir Walter Elliot's character. Vanity of person and of situation. His vanity, a sign of superficiality and narcissism, precedes him. His vanity forces a rift between himself and Anne. His vanity, shared with Elizabeth Elliot, alienates Anne at home and forces her to look elsewhere for love. Finally, illness is a key motif. Whether real or feigned, illnesses reveal the true nature of the novel's characters. Mary Elliot Musgrove imagines herself ill in order to gain attention, showing her shallowness, while Anne tends to her willingly, showing her goodness. Louisa Musgrove is high-spirited and intent on marrying Captain Wentworth until after her accident, when she instead falls in love with a quiet, intense Captain Benwick. Mrs. Smith bears her illness without complaint, and Anne treats her friend with dignity, while her father disparages her, underscoring the superior morals of these two characters.